episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor. Welcome, everybody, again to another episode of the show. We're bringing you another fascinating guest today, helping to create a better tomorrow on many different fronts. We are going to be continuing our virtual road trip around the world. Today, we are headed over to Israel, and we have the honor of spending time today with Dr. Neta Lavon, who is Vice President of Research and Development at a company called Aleph Farms, which is a cultivated meat company that is helping to shape the future of food, ultimately by growing high quality, slaughter-free beef steaks directly from cow stem cells, preserving natural resources, avoiding the use of various chemicals and antibiotics. Dr. Lavon is an expert in various stem cell applications in biotech. Previously, she held the role of Chief Operating Officer at the stem cell company Kadimastem, where she developed various cell therapy products from stem cells for ALS and diabetes. She was a researcher at Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles, where she established and banked dozens of novel pluripotent stem cell lines. She currently holds her Ph.D. and Master's in Biotech and Bachelor's in Food Sciences from the Hebrew University in Israel. A lot of exciting things to talk about today. Dr. Neta Lavon, thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to come talk to us.
Thank you for your kind invitation. I'm happy to be with you.
It's great having you, and I'd love to start things off like we typically do by handing you the floor for a couple of minutes, just to a little further introduce yourself. Take us back to where you grew up, when you developed these interests in science and biotech, and ultimately how you found yourself sort of at this intersection of stem cells for health and stem cells for food, and how your path has sort of taken you in the last couple of years.
Thank you very much. It's a great question that I like to answer, and as an example of, I would say, the diversity of life and taking all kinds of opportunities that fall into your hands on the way. I started my career studying chemistry and biochemistry of food, because I wanted to be a food scientist. I really like to eat food and to prepare food, and I thought that doing it in industrial production would be interesting for me. I had a background in chemistry from the high school, and when I graduated, it was a pretty long time ago, there wasn't really food tech in Israel or all over the world, I would say. The science in food was analyzing the sterility, the microorganism status of the food, and some nutritional values, but there weren't real innovations in food. People did not realize the importance and the effect that we could have by developing new technologies related to food. So I moved to biotech, and I started working about stem cells, with stem cells, and did my PhD at the era of the stem cells. The embryonic stem cells were just isolated from humans, and it was a great hype. This is the holy grail, actually, of understanding embryonic development and all kinds of genetic diseases using these cells that we could never learn before we had them. And I was taking part in research that explored the differentiation of these cells into the hepatic cells of the liver for treating pathologies related to liver diseases, and to pancreatic cells producing insulin in relation to the glucose levels and diabetes, of course, related diseases. And that's where really I started to fall in love with stem cells and their use, and to understand the huge potential that they have. When I graduated, I did a short position in Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles to explore further opportunities related to stem cells, and being involved in the installation or the establishment of the Stem Cell Institute there. It was the times of the Proposition 71 in California, while Bush abandoned stem cell research, but in California, it was very much interesting to work at. And when I came back to Israel, I actually took part in a new company called Kadimastem, developing cell therapy, as you said, for ALS and diabetes, being the first employee. And in my last role, after 8 years, I've been the COO of the company, responsible for developing the clean rooms, the GMP facilities, the application for the FDA, understanding the regulatory requirements for such therapies for clinical trials that we were just about to begin. And then I got a phone call from a friend of mine, a colleague that worked with me a few years before. And she said, do you have a minute to spare to speak with me? And I said, yes, of course. I took my lab coat and stepped outside, sat on a bench under the sun. And I remember she told me, are you interested in being the strategy leader of a company developing food from stem cells? And I was like, what? I'm developing therapy for ALS. Let me think about it. Let me sleep about it, you know. And I went home, and as a scientist, I started reading, and I couldn't stop reading, and really realized the impact, or the huge impact that we could have from developing cultured meat as a substitute for the current food or meat production and usage, looking on the long term as a solution that is necessary to avoid the issues that we have related to food security and food safety and sustainability, and the huge impact it has. And I said yes, and I joined this journey 4 years ago as the company was established. And since then, I really enjoy this journey. It's a wonderful and exciting research with great team members and a great progress that we have.
And speaking of your partners, obviously, Aleph Farms has been in the press a lot lately. You've raised a lot of money. I've seen some partnerships with groups like Mitsubishi. Talk just a little bit about the background to the company. I know you spent a couple of years, but give us a little bit on. And I know you've seen the show I did with the Lou Cooper House on Blue New Loop, focused on seafood. Talk a little bit about what the cultured meats industry currently looks like, because most of what we see in the press is, hey, they made a cultured steak, it's $200,000, we'll get the price down. Where does the industry sort of look like nowadays in 2021?
Yeah, so currently there are around more than 50 companies developing cultured meat products from different animals, birds, mammals, and fish, crustaceans, and around the world, even more than 50. And some companies that develop some complementary technologies to sell for these companies, not as producing meat, but producing all kind of technologies that can be additive for the producer themselves. There are actually around, I think, 10 companies that are more established, and we are among these leading companies that have already been in the field in the last 3 years. Okay. And we are one of these companies that producing beef, and we decided to focus on beef because the beef has the most, I would say, dramatic effect on the environmental cost because of the greenhouse gas emission produced by the cows and the land or contamination. We know that we need around 9 calories to feed a cow in order to get 1 calorie of the animal itself. And because we don't eat the whole animal and around 1/3 of it, so the feed conversion rate for the cow is to give her 25 calories in order to get 1 calorie on our plate that we eat. So this is completely inefficient method.
Sure.
And accordingly, we decided to focus on the beef. Of course, it also one of the, I would say, most prominent dishes that is celebrated all over the world. Almost every time that we want to have a feast, we eat the meat, and it has the advantages, of course, of the iron, the B12, the zinc, all kind of other nutrients that we cannot get easily from other sources. So we decided to focus on bovine. Another thing we have is the technologies coming from the Technion Institute of Technology, headed by Professor Shulamit Levenberg. She's a world expert in tissue engineering. Mm-hmm. And due to her abilities and her being part of the company and technologies developed at Aleph, we have the expertise of how to grow a tissue. And to grow a tissue and not only cells is something that is unique to Aleph farms. And by this, we can grow steaks, which are much more attractive than the minced meat, having unique texture and taste, and allows us to combine different cell types together, growing on the same meat cut, on the same tissue. The fact that we can grow different cell types together enhances the taste and the texture, but also enhances the cells themselves and their growth and their maturation, because they have a crosstalk between them. And this is a huge advantage, having this ability to grow three-dimensional tissues, not only because of the texture and the structure, but also because of the biology and the growth and the enhanced growth of the cells. The other unique value that Aleph has is the fact that we work with cells that are without genetic modifications and non-immortalized cells. And we focused, I would say, the first 2 years of the company in having our own cell lines, establishing them ourselves, because we see a lot of importance taking out these two issues of immortalization and genetic modifications to have a safer product that is much more accepted by the consumers. We develop a novel product. We know that we have to educate the consumers, the eaters about this new product, and we're really trying to avoid as much as we can complicating the things that we are developing. So we use natural cells taken from an animal without slaughter. We take these cells, we create banks of cells from them, and these banks of cells are fully tested and validated and can serve for producing thousands of tons of meat from one such isolation of cells.
And, you bring up an extremely interesting point there, because you're pointing out that, and we don't think of this as much, but in nature, when that sort of fertilized egg, where the stem cells begin, whether it leads to a turkey or a pig or a cow or a human, a lot of magic happens in between there, and part of your magic is how we take these cells, and as you were saying, the cells are not a steak. We need the three-dimensional structures and many different types of tissues. Talk a little bit about, because I can imagine that's probably where a lot of the trial and error goes on between yum and no, this doesn't taste right. And then, are there interesting things that you learn thinking to your human health side, because obviously a stem cell is not a heart or a liver or a brain? Are you learning interesting stuff working in food science and working on creating these foods that you think, oh, you know what, this is probably an important learning for the human health side one day, because we need these structured tissues in 3 dimensions with vasculature and so forth to make people healthy as well?
Yeah, yes, definitely. There is a crosstalk between these two systems. First of all, we know that there is a huge synteny between human and cow. 80% of their genome is similar, is the same. Yeah. So most of us came from developing human therapies using human cells. That's why it was also, I would say, straightforward to us, or a little bit easier, I wouldn't say straightforward, to move to the mammalian, to the cow, and to explore the differences. Most of the mechanisms are very similar, but of course we have to optimize it. We have to develop the specific recipes that are needed in order to take the cells, to make them proliferate, to make them differentiate into the different cell types that we need, and then combine them and create the tissue. And we use a lot of the knowledge that we got from the human studies, and we believe that in the future, the lessons that we learn here would serve also and would go back to the biotech industry in many aspects. And we are now writing one of our patents related to it. I cannot tell more than that, but once it will be out, it will protect all aspects, not only cultured meat, definitely. I would say also that the challenges here are different, because when we did cell therapy, we didn't look too much on the cost of the production and scale of the production. And this is two of the major challenges of the cultured meat industry.
Yep.
And it's fascinating. It's really things that I never looked at, and now when we explore them in details, we understand that we can do it. We can really reduce the price, bring it to a price that is similar to the conventional meat, or even similar to the current plant-based product that we see in the market, and attractive for the consumers. We see our meat as a product of high quality that will be able to be in every house, like an iPhone or something like this. And that is our vision, and that's what we developed. The first product would be thin cut beef steaks, as we released by our concept already in 2018. And we are now building our pilot production plant, and we plan to launch it next year. These reasons of having the pilot, having this source of cells, having the path for reducing the cost dramatically, attracted the investors and allowed us to have the fundraising of such a great amount and such a great group of supporters that give a lot of trust in Aleph Farms, and this is really important for us. Some of them are investors, some of them are strategic partners, some food companies. We have the arm of Abu Dhabi, which relates to our vision of the global expansion into neighboring countries, which is important for us as well. And this is really exciting, and I would say that the great team we have here brought into these achievements.
And you're thinking about the partners. Obviously, you did the deal with Mitsubishi recently, Japan, a major market for you, obviously Israel and the neighborhood. Are there other, when you do your market research in this and you're out there talking sort of the global arena, are you finding interesting countries that are either, yes, we really like this concept, or other countries, I don't know, that no, they don't like the concept? Any surprises during your market research that you could talk about?
So we did focused market research in few territories, among them Germany, UK, US, and we see huge interest in Aleph Farms product. I would say that even Germany, that was considered a little bit more conservative, have a really high acceptance. We see that the acceptance gets higher because we use non-GMO methodologies, no GMO cells, and no GMO, non-GMO, any other products in the production. And this really brings it higher. In Europe, for example, we know that the regulatory approval path for genetic modification with products with genetic modification of cultured meat will be different and more complex than non-genetically modified cells. So by this really opened the European market for our products. The decision on the market, or what market to choose, would be dependent on, of course, several parameters, among them the consumers, but not only. Regulatory path and collaboration with the local entities is very much important. The ability to establish the plant in place, because we are planning to be a global company producing the products in plants that would be adjacent to our consumers. We don't plan to produce them in Israel and then to export them. We don't want to have transportation. We can avoid it by using our technology. We have frozen cell banks. We can ship the cells to our plants, giving them all the instructions and the recipes how to create the meat locally to the people that live around this facility. And that is our vision. I cannot really say where we decided to start with, but we definitely plan to expand in 2023 to 2 other locations in the world, to our next mid-scale facilities in the world. Yeah.
Excellent. And yeah, I mean, obviously, all this is completely non-confidential. So if I touch on anything, just you can push that one aside. But I just I pulled down before we had the chance to talk sort of the USDA. This is from 2018, but so I was looking at the fact, aside from the 33 million heads of cattle that we consume in the United States, we also eat 9 billion chickens, 240 million turkeys, 2 million sheep, 121 million pigs, and the list goes on and on. Obviously, nothing confidential here, but as you build up and you develop these technologies, I see, not just for the creation of these interesting forms of meat and the steaks, but start working on how we take care of these amazing quantities that we in the U.S. consume and everyone else consumes around the world. Any interesting numbers on what a typical factory may look like in terms of, hey, in this factory here, we can produce 20 acres of what a cattle would normally produce with cattle and so forth, or is it a little early for some of those numbers?
Well, we did these calculations, and we see such a plant replacing a farm of few hundreds of cows, wow. which can really replace this livestock farming, and that's really how we see ourselves. So we want to. We completely understand that cultured meat is going to be taking a high share of the market in the next, 10, 20 years, as there are some surveys that were published by financial companies. Around 35% of the meat consumption is estimated to come from cultured meat. But we definitely don't think that we will replace the whole livestock industry. We actually would like to minimize the industrial intensive farming, but if the farmers that are growing cows in small scales, in free range, have better methods for growing them, more sustainable, we believe that we will coexist together, and along us there will be some products coming from other sources like plants or like fermentation. So as we envision it, you can go into the supermarket and there will be few aisles that you can choose between them. There will be the traditional meat, I don't call it conventional because it wouldn't be conventional by then. It will be the traditional meat, the plant-based, the fermented-based, and the cultured meat, of course. So, and everyone could choose his, what really speaks to his ethics or to his pocket or to his taste or whatever is around that. And that's how we see it.
Very cool. Now we come to the part of the show where I have the questions from my children. As people watch the show usually know, I give the bio of our guests to them and see what they come up with. And actually 2 interesting questions today. One, which gave to our friend Lou Cooperhouse a couple of months ago. But as you're developing these technologies for bovine and pigs and chickens and so forth, obviously the question comes up if this magic is possible on the common species when we get to the lions and the gorillas and the elephants and so forth, which we do not want to kill, of course. Do you ever get strange requests from investors or outside parties to produce unusual exotic meats? And if they showed up with $1 billion, would you do it for them?
Yeah, that's right. So definitely, Aleph Farm is planning to have a diverse spectrum of culinary experiences associated with eating the meat, and to fit different food cultures and different dishes. And what we develop is a platform. So we start with bovine, but definitely we plan to move, and we already started developing other mammals as sources of meat. And we are keen to understand the differences in terms of the technology, the taste, the texture, the effectiveness of our process. Of course, we will have to do some optimization, but we definitely plan to move to sheep, to other mammals, for example. And the exotic animals are definitely exotic, but we have to make sure that we have wide enough consumers, that can be purchasing these products. And I believe that currently we will not expand to exotic meat. Maybe one day, but we definitely decided to expand into space, which you can tell your kids and would definitely be exciting for them, I believe.
Yeah, it's funny. Keep going, because this was the second part of this question, but please.
So we did a first experiment in the ISS in 2019. We were the first one to grow cultured meat in space. We did it together with a company from Russia called the 3D Bioprinting.
Okay.
And together they printed our bovine cells in space in the Russian bench of the International Space Station. And you can see on our website the photo of this product. It was the first cultivated meat in space. It was very exciting and a great collaboration with this expert team. And we are now actually having the Aleph Zero, which is a subsidiary or part of Aleph Farms, one of our units, that is promoting meat in space, seeing it as a solution for the future, for the astronauts, for the colonies on one hand. On the other hand, we really believe that the conditions in space and the requirements and limitation force us to be very much creative and inventive and develop solutions to creating meat in very stringent conditions with limited sources, and requires to do recycling, reuse, and all these things that we are learning in this process of developing products for the space. We are planning also to implement on Earth once we have these solutions and conclusions. So this is really two arms for this project, and we are planning to join the mission of Eitan Shtibe, an Israeli astronaut that is planned to be launched to space in February 2022. He will take one of our experiments, and we will definitely, tell it once it will be launched and release this more details about the experiment.
Really exciting. Really exciting. And yeah, he came up with the space question as well. And not only have I exposed him your technologies, but I make him watch Star Trek from the 1960s about how this food just appears on the spaceship. So very exciting for him. Neta, coming back to you though, obviously you've spent a fascinating career so far in academia, in the human health side, now in the food science side, everything sort of coming full circle here. Talk about some of the people that you met along the way, the mentors, the influencers, the people that have kept Dr. Neta Lavon sort of on this path and excited that to keep moving forward in these segments.
Yeah, so I was very fortunate to work with the best scientists in Israel, I would say one of them is Professor Nissim Ben-Benisti, who was one of the first to start working with embryonic stem cells.
Yep.
When he heard that the Israeli researcher and gynecologist Professor Itzkovich isolated the first cell line of human embryonic stem cells, he did it in Madison, Wisconsin with Jamie Thompson. It was a paper in Science.
Yep.
He immediately took the car, went into the Technion and took the cells to the lab, and then he was the first one to do all this exciting research, and I joined the team as it was established, and it was a pleasure to work with him in all aspects, personal and scientific and technological. And the next was Professor Michel Ravel that established Kadimastem. He's actually the inventor of the interferon beta, that is a blockbuster drug by Merck Serono. He is emeritus of the Weizmann Institute, and when he retired, he established the Kadimastem company, and he is a laureate of the Israeli prize, and one of the best scientists in Israel. Really, it was really a pleasure to work with him. And when I moved to the food science, on the top of working with Professor Levenberg, that is really a great scientist and expert in tissue engineering, and we have a very good collaboration and interaction with my experience with cells and stem cells and her experience with tissue engineering, and it's really complementary. The team from the Israeli Kitchen Hub, which really were one of the first, if not the first, to establish a food tech accelerator in the world, are a great group that is headed by Jonathan Berger and Amir Zeideman, that really, I would say, spread the news all over the world. They started in a small city in the periphery of Israel called Ashdod. And the idea is that this accelerator that is funded by the Strauss Group, which is one of the Israeli biggest food companies in Israel, Strauss. It's a combination of the Strauss Group together with the Israeli Innovation Authorities. And the accelerator really brings projects that are attractive in all kinds of aspects, of course, scientifically, in terms of marketing and funding, and they select this project, and they are funded by the Strauss company and by the Israel Innovation Authority, and that's how we started our first 2 years. And they supported us in all aspects as an accelerator with business development and connections with the food industry and, you know, all kinds of other issues. And from there, we really went on, and of course, they are part of our investors along the way, even also in this round B. And that's a really great, for me, it was a great introduction to the food arena, for the food industry, and probably many more people around me. I would say that my family and also the team that I work with are inspiration, definitely. I own a lot for their amazing work and dedication and how they do it personally, and also dedication to the idea of cultured meat, of finding a solution for this food security for the future of our children. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Very inspiring message there. So, really impressive stuff, Neta. It's a fascinating path. I look forward to watching you and the company as it moves forward to further make this a reality on the large scale, and be rooting you on, definitely. For everybody that's going to be listening to this particular episode on our podcast networks or watching on the YouTube channel, you've been listening to Dr. Neta Lavon, Vice President of R&D at Aleph Farms in Israel. Neta, thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to come talk to us for a little while. Thanks for everything you're doing there. And as we say on our show, thanks for helping to create the better tomorrow through your work and your research. A very inspiring story.
Thank you, Ira, for the invitation. It was my pleasure.